Hey everybody, this is Jennifer, youth pastor at Homeopath Pentecostal Holiness Church. This is
Marissa, and I am a freshman at Emmanuel College.
We are back with one of our new devotional videos, and this was entitled
The Melody of Your Heart.
We must be in a little music kick right now, but Mozart was quoted as saying melody is the essence of music. Joseph Haydn said it is the melody which is the charm of music, but the most difficult to produce. I guess if we're producing it on our own, but today we're going to talk about God producing the melody of our hearts and us having to find that melody. But he also went on to say the invention of a fine melody is a work of genius. Pretty good stuff. So tell us a little bit about a melody and some music theory here.
Well, a melody is basically, it's musical sounds in an agreeable succession or arrangement.
So it's supposed to sound good.
Yes, it's supposed to sound good. Now, what goes into that melody really depends on what the composer wants it to sound like. But there are some kind of general rules or really guidelines, because in music there are always exceptions to every single rule. You could be playing in the key of G, and you got your first three chords are completely fixed, but then the writer throws a total curveball and he gives you an incidental that you have to play, or he modulates and you have to switch keys, or you've got to change the chord because you've been playing the wrong one.
Y'all just act like you know what she's talking about.
But there are a lot of different elements that go into creating this melody. And those notes have to be played in the right order in order for it to sound right too, because if they're played out of order, it doesn't even have the same effect anymore.
And with melodies being difficult to produce, it's very easy for songwriters just to kind of copycat or copy some melodies. And so here's some popular songs that kind of borrowed melodies from other places. My Country 'Tis of Thee was actually a song to the King and Queen of England in 1745, and we just stole it. For He's a Jolly Good Fellow actually comes from like a bloody battle hymn. That doesn't sound like he's a jolly good fellow. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star actually came from a French lullaby about a kid with a sweet tooth. They must have totally known me. And then the Star Spangled Banner actually came from like a gentleman's club.
Yeah,
we sing this all the time.
Yikes.
And then Happy Birthday to You actually came from a song that came back from 1893, Good Morning to All. So a lot of times, this songwriters, they just end up copycatting these melodies because to actually plagiarize, you have to actually take a substantial amount of the melody. You could just change one or two notes and actually call it your own. But that is not what God does for our lives.
No, because Psalm 57:7, it says that David's heart was completely fixed and that he would sing praises unto his God basically forever. I mean, we all know as David as being called a man after God's own heart. So we know that his heart must have been in tune with the melody that God had written for his life. I mean, with every breath and every string that he plucked on his little harp, he was following the exact melody of what God had written for him. And I mean, he was basically plagiarizing what God had written because he wasn't changing anything. He was copying it directly from the original composer.
And you don't have to be able to play an instrument like David did to be able to follow the melody that God has for your life. It was the way that he lived.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean he didn't hit a few wrong notes here and there.
Ooh. Ouch.
We all know about the incident with Bathsheba and Uriah the Hittite. And then, of course, not long after that was the death of his son. But it was like as soon as he knew he'd gotten off track,
he was able to switch.
And get right back on it.
Yes.
He had to be able to hear by ear like you do.
Maybe.
But it's true. David immediately found the melody again. But how often do we get off track, hit some sour notes, the melody doesn't line up for what God has for our lives, and we stay there.
We just keep going with the wrong melody.
Yes. And if you've ever heard a song that completely gets off like that,
it's a little rough.
It's not pleasing to your ear, and nobody certainly is going to be able to sing along to it. But the Old Testament doesn't note David for the sour notes that he hit.
Always for the melody that he played as being the man of
After God's own heart. Yeah, and it wasn't just about being able to play those notes on the harp. He was playing them on his heart, which is pretty awesome. So God is the songwriter. He is our original songwriter. And he has a melody that reflects what he feels about for each of our lives. He doesn't just take and change 3 notes from hers and apply it to mine.
Oh no, there's a completely different song for each and every one of us. Mine looks completely different from hers.
No, but he is this ultimate songwriter. And you know, great songs in the musical world, they're not just born.
No. They're carefully crafted. Each individual note, step, measure is carefully planned. It's definitely mulled over probably for a very long time.
We would say like blood, sweat, and tears if it was something that we were putting our hand to the plow to do, because it's a very unique melody that has to fit each and every person's life.
And there's over 7 billion people on this earth, which means there are over 7 billion different melodies God has carefully put together.
But the problem is we don't always play those melodies that he has on our lives. And I looked it up. It says typical songwriters rewrite melodies at least 20 times.
Wow.
I'd hate to know that God had to rewrite my melody 20 times. And it may even be like 50 or 100, maybe 1,000 for all we know. How many days have we lived? But truthfully, he has to go in and kind of tweak some notes to get us back on track again sometimes, to get us back to where he would have us to be so that we align with this melody. So I think it's so important that when we are playing that melody that God has for our lives, just imagine how proud he is of that. Because this was a melody he was already playing for your life before you were even born.
Yes.
And he's finally hearing it produce the sound that he had long hoped for and dreamed for your life.
But see, when we get off track, you know, we could be in the right key. We could be playing the wrong notes. We'd be playing, you know, everything right. Oh, snap, an incidental just got chucked at us and we got completely off track. Our tempo got messed up. We were going too fast or too slow after it got thrown at us. We modulated. We went up. We went down. We slowed down. We sped up. We could have completely started playing an entirely different melody altogether.
And this girl right here, she's a mastermind at playing by ear. And yet I've heard you hit a wrong note or two before.
Yes.
Reminding us that we're imperfect, but also reminding us that we have to be listening and completely in tune to this melody that he has for our lives.
You might not be playing his melody because you might not even be listening for it.
But we want it to be recognized as the melody God has for our lives. What if it doesn't sound anything like what he originally crafted or intended for our lives? Almost like going back to the blueprints that he has for our lives.
Yes.
What if we're playing an entirely different song? What if we are choosing to create a different song?
What if we are taking the original composer's work and possibly completely scrapping it and starting over? It usually doesn't work that well, especially since, you know, he's the mastermind and we have far less knowledge than what he has. I mean, he's like, you know, one of those great composers like Mozart or Beethoven, and we're sitting over here with a little iPod trying to, you know,
shuffle, mix some things together.
Right, we're trying to create a mixtape.
Yeah. And that's a sad situation because it's nothing like what he intended. I would say the biggest trap that we fall into is the tempo. Because this girl can't keep a rhythm. So what if we try to go too fast, speed it up, before we're ready to move into certain avenues of our lives? Or what if we're moving way too slow and we miss the blessings of God?
Yeah, when we're moving too slow, he's got to come behind us and say, you know, I'm going to poke you and prod you because I got to get you moving. You're falling behind, you're messing up. You could be messing up other people's melody too.
Ooh, you could be affecting others like that. So apparently we all need one of those little metronome boxes, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. I definitely do, that would help. But so how do we find God's melody for our lives?
Well, we have to listen for it. We can't just expect to wake up one day and start playing his melody all of a sudden like some magic trick just happened.
Yep, it tells us that we have to basically allow our own life songs to silence. Whatever we think that we have that's going for our own lives is probably not what God has going for us. Habakkuk 2:20 says we have to be quiet in his presence. I don't know how many times a day as a school teacher I'll say, just be quiet. Because I need to be able to think a little bit, but so does everybody else. But it's true, if we're constantly doing our own thing or saying our own thing, then we're not going to be able to hear not only his voice, but that direction, that track that he wants us to be on. And then once it gets quiet, then we can listen for his voice. For those notes, Proverbs 3:6 says, listen for God's voice. So when it gets quiet, it's not so that we can fill our head with other things.
No, it's so he can put his melody into our heads and into our hearts so that we can then produce what he has beautifully written just for you.
And the last part would be you have to follow the example. Once you hear it, you have to follow it. And this is typically what you do because you listen to something first, right?
Yes.
You listen, well, you kind of get that melody out of your own head first. And then you start listening to what it's supposed to sound like. And then you go back and follow the example. Ephesians 5:1 says, be imitators of God. So whatever it sounds like, when he plays our life song, that's what we're supposed to do first. And it may be that it's note by note. Because if he gave me like 10 in a row, you know I'd miss something along the way. You might be okay, not me. But seriously, like 1 or 2. Get in line, and then he'll give us that next kind of step. But it's, I found this quote, it says, to hear God's voice, which is, I think, the melody for your life, you must turn down the world's volume.
Listening to him instead of listening to all the other melodies that could be easing their way into your life or easing their way over it.
And other people trying to craft your melody as opposed to God crafting your melody. Maybe they have too much influence on your life and they're pulling you down and they're changing notes and you didn't even know about it because you were just willing to follow in that way. So very dangerous traps we have with creating our own melody, changing our own melody, but most importantly, we should be reflecting the melody of his heart in our hearts. You want to close us on a word of prayer?
Yes. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for all the people that watch this. Lord, we ask that for all those who do view this, that they would begin to reflect the melody of your heart and what you have written for their lives, and just listen to your voice, that they can be a direct reflection of who you are and what your voice is and the plan that you have for each and every one of us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, keep an eye out for our regular full-length videos, our devotional posts on Facebook. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.